Following you was easy enough, said Glark. I mean, 20 people? Leave a trail. No problem there. Half the time I had to be careful I didn't walk into you. And then I thought, they're going south, in a straight line. So I might as well go on ahead, spy out the land, see what's happening. One person can move a lot faster than 20, so why not? I got a snarg to ride too. They respond well to a bit of kindness, he said. Mind you, you have to use quite a lot of cruelty as well. And that's how I met Helena. She's very strange. There was a pause. Then Pismir said, I think we missed something there. You'll see where she lives, said Glark. I don't think people see it unless she wants them to. I've never seen anything like it. And there she was, and she told me where you were going and how I could hang on the bottom of that lifting cart and pinch the armor off Vortgorn and release the pones and how they could fly. Everything. How did she know all this? Recondo demanded. Because we're going to tell her, said Glark. Don't ask me how it works. They remembered forward as well as backwards, said Bane. But they must never tell, said Pismir. Otherwise, dreadful things could happen. I don't know about that, said Glark guardedly. The way I see it, you've been freed. That doesn't sound dreadful. But we must get back to the tribe, said Pismir. And my people, said Recondo. They need us. I've been thinking about that, said Glark. There's 200 Mudrungs and 3,000 Deaf Meanies. And they're all armed and together, and they need us? We've got some good lads in the tribe, and Snibberl's with them, isn't he? Said Recondo. Yes, we hope so. Right then, and your people know how to fight. We're 4 people in a strange land with enemies all over the place. I think we need them. Anyway, we must go see Kulena. But she's told you, and it worked, and said Recondo. We can say thank you some other time. No, said Pismir. If Glark's right, and she's told him something she remembers from the future, and we don't go, then I don't know. Anything could happen. The whole fabric of the carpet could roll up or something. It would be the worst thing that could ever happen anywhere. Worse than, Recondo began. Worse than anything you could possibly imagine, said Glark. They all thought about this. She must trust you a lot then, said Bane. For the rest of the day, the Pones moved on Ikitung's back the 4 dozen, or looked out silently at the lengthening shadows. But for the most of the time, they were each busy with their own thoughts. Dusk grew underfoot, and in the unseen little creatures buzzed and clicked. And growing on the apple-green fluff that draped itself in the thick festoons high above the flowers, fluff flowers, bigger than a man, with petals that glittered in 1,000 shades of green, from deep olive to cool yellow, that gave out a scent that filled the glades and tasted like the color green. Now, this is very interesting, began Pismir, sitting up. It was the first time any of them had spoken in an hour. He stopped and stared across the clearing. Every pone turned its head in that direction. It's something you don't often it's something you don't often see," he added. The others looked where he pointed. Among the greenery at the far side of the glade, a wild pig was watching them solemnly. As they all turned, it backed away hastily, and they could hear it crashing off through the hairs. "That's common enough," grunted Bane. "It's just that it was brown," said Pismire. "It should have been green. Almost all wild creatures in the carpet take on the color of the hairs where they were born. Protective camouflage." "Perhaps it just wandered here," said Bane. "No," said Glurk, grinning. "Something brought it here. We're nearly there. You'll be amazed. You really will." The Pones turned and pushed their way along another track. As they shouldered their way through the thick fronds, scores of small creatures scurried away hurriedly. They were all the colors of the carpet. And then the Pones stepped through. Hairs clustered in closely on the borders of a wide clearing, reflecting the dim glow of the thing in its center. It was one uncut crystal of sugar, high as the great palace of Jeopard, whiter than a bone. The crystal glittered coldly in the green dimness. It caught all the light that filtered through the densely packed dust, and within its marvelous cubic bulk, a shifting white glow danced. In parts, it shone like polished varnish, reflecting the faces of the creatures that clustered around it. There were dust rabbits and weft borers of all colors, pigs by the herd, long-necked soraths, patient fat tromps, grompipers, scurrying goats with spiral horns, and creatures even Pismire could not recognize. A scaly thing with spikes on its back, and a long creature that seemed to be all legs. The clearing was filled with the sound of 1,000 tongues licking. Accutung and his herd pounded forward, almost throwing Glurk and the rest out of the saddle. Smaller creatures leaped aside hastily and to give them room. "It's beautiful," whispered Bracando at last. Bane stood staring up, gaping. Even Pismire was impressed. They climbed down from the Pone's back and walked gingerly up to the smooth surface. The animals licking the sugar hardly paid them any attention. Glurk cracked a piece off with his knife and stood crunching it thoughtfully. "Have a taste," he said, tossing a piece to Bane. Bane bit it cautiously. "Sugar," said Bane. "I've only ever tasted it once before. There was a crystal down near the Hearthlands. The Emperor used to get it in very small amounts. Like honey, but different," said Bracando. "How does it get here?" "Like grit and salt and ash do. From above," said Pismire. "We don't know any more than that." Instinctively, they looked up at the spreading hairs. "Well, here's our lunch anyway." Bracando's voice broke into silence. "Take your pick, fried tromp or baked grommer. No wonder they're all colors. This must attract them from everywhere. Mind you," he added, "it hardly seems sporting to kill them while they're not looking." "So put away your knife," said a new voice. Pismire choked on his sugar. A figure stood a little away. It was tall, with the thin face of a white, and looked ghostly in the light of the crystal. It had a mass of hair. It was hard to see where the hair ended and the shapeless long robe began. And she was young, but as she moved, sometimes she was old, and sometimes she was middle-aged. Sometimes time moved across her face like shadows. One of her hands held the collar of a white snarg, which was swishing its tail menacingly. Said Glurk. This is a Kulena. The white walked past them and patted Architung's flank. The Pone's long neck turned, and his little eyes looked at Kulena. Then he clumsily lowered himself to his knees and laid his head on the ground. Kulena turned and smiled. The whole clearing seemed to smile with her. The change was sudden and dramatic. So here you are, she said, and now you must tell me of your adventures. I know you will, because I remember you did. Follow me. There will be food. At the far side of the clearing was Kulena's home, or one of her homes. It was no more than a roof of woven dust on poles. There were no walls, no doors, no ditch, no stockade to protect her at night, and no place for a fire. Above it was a large hive of, you guessed it, Hymeters. Animals grazed and dozed peacefully around Kulena's camp. When Glurk and the others approached, the Hymeters hummed furiously and rose from their hives in an angry swarm. The four ducked and tried to protect their faces with their arms until Kulena whistled once. The creatures swooped harmlessly overhead and returned peacefully to their home in the hairs. Glurk caught a glimpse of the long, sharp stingers. She sent them back, whispered Bracando. She just whistled, and they obeyed her. On the floor under the shelter was a pile of fruit and some bowls of green liquid. I had this before, said Glurk. It's sap from the green hairs. Sets you up a treat. They sat down. Pismir shifted uneasily, and Kulena smiled at him. Say what you think, she said. I remember what you did, but you must say it. Whites mustn't tell people the future, said Pismir. Everyone knows that. They never tell. It's too dangerous for people to know what will happen. This is all... I remember. I interrupted you here, said the white. Yes, I know the rules, and that's what they are, and all they are. They are only rules. I am not Pismir. Quite like the other whites. Have you ever heard the word Thungorg? I know you have. Oh yes, the whites who can remember things that... Oh, my word, said Pismir, shocked. I thought that was just a story. I thought Thungorgs were monsters. It is just a story, but that doesn't mean it isn't true. The rules don't apply to me. They're only rules. Rules don't have to apply. Not always. I don't care much for cities, but this crushing and destruction of the carpet, this forging of bronze and trampling of dust, she shook her head. No, this shall not be. You will go to where tomorrow? Before the moles leave Jeopard, there will be a battle. You must win. I will not tell you how, but you must win. In the meantime, you may spend this night here. Do not be afraid. Nothing comes to my house that I do not expect. No, said Bane. I need to know. Why are you helping us? Whites remember everything. Everything that's ever happened. And what will happen. And they don't tell what's different about you? Helena put her head on one side. Did you hear me? Said Bane. Yes, I was remembering what I told you. Yes, now I remember. There is so much, you see. So much. She stood up and walked a little way away from them. Then she turned. Pismir should know this, she said. Sometimes, very rarely, as rare as my albino snark here, sometimes a white is born who is different, as different from whites as they are from you. You see? We remember everything. So do all whites, said Bane. No, said Kulena. They remember only all those things that happened. We remember everything that might happen. I remember what will happen if you don't win. I know all possibilities. For everything that happens, a million things won't happen. I live all of them. I remember you winning, and I remember you losing. I remember the mole's triumph. I remember you triumph. Both are real for me. For me, both of these have happened. My brother and sister whites remember the thread of history, but I remember all the threads that never even get woven. For me, all possibilities are real. I live in them all. But why? Asked Bane. Someone must. Otherwise, they never could have happened. She stepped into the shadows. They heard her voice. It seemed to come from somewhere distant. Nothing has to happen. History isn't something you live. It is something you make. One decision, one person. At the right time. Nothing is too small to make a difference. Anything can be changed. The voice faded. After a while, Bane got to his feet, feeling very clumsy, and peered into the shadows. She's gone. I wonder if she can ever be entirely in one place, said Pismir. What do we do now? I'm going to sleep, said Glurk. I don't know about you, but it's been a busy day. Several times Bane awoke and thought he heard crashes and cries in the wind, but when he listened hard, they seemed to disappear. Pismir dreamed. He saw hairs bending and bowing as if shaken by a high wind, and the gleam of the 10,000 eyes, green, red, and white, and the figure of Kulena, her hair caught and tugged by the air, treading through the noisy darkness, living everything that could be and might be and was. Glurk dreamed of slim bodies pushing swiftly through the undergrowth. As they passed, the carpet seemed to come alive. It was like a splash in the cup. The ripples ran out and out, getting bigger as they ran. Deep in underground caves, sleeping creatures awoke and howled. He saw the Trimbrul and great silver dome that lay far beyond Varnishholm. He saw the glow as the whites mined their varnish at Varnishholm, the flames spouting from their forge. In his dream, he moved through the night hairs like a spirit until he came to the endless flatness. The carpet ended suddenly, and from its shores, the flatness ran on forever. He looked for hairs, and there were none, just flatness without end, and balls of dust that were bowled over and over the forlorn wind. And Kulena stood by the last hair, her robe flapping in the gusts. Glurk sat up suddenly. It was morning. Yellow light dampened the clearing, making the hair shine like bronze. Bracando was still asleep. The others were talking quietly. One look was enough. Not exactly dreams, said Pismir. What we dreamt weren't exactly dreams. she lives all of her lives at once. We picked up echoes. I saw Kilena walking through the carpet, began Glurk. I think I saw Snibble too. And I saw the hearthlands and the fire in the sky, added Pismir. There were all sorts of creatures, said Glurk. Bracando turned over and opened his eyes. He listened to the others for a moment, then nodded. I was back in the High Gateland. There was a domed cave, and under the dome a throne of bronze with a Vortgorn on it. He had a yellow beard and a crown. 2 moles were standing in front of him. I'll swear one of them was Gormalish. They were laughing. Then one snatched the crown, but the Vortgorn just sat with his chin on his hand and said nothing. That be Stagbat, their king, said Glurk. I heard the Vortgorn guard talking. The moles turned up one day after Frey had struck nearby, and they said Frey was a Doomy weapon. They said they'd be allies. Now they run the place, of course. You can't control Frey, said Pismir. I keep on telling you, it's a natural phenomenon. They always find our weak points, said Glurk. He looked across at Bane, who had been silent. And what did you dream? He asked. I dreamed, Bane began, and then seemed to wake up. I dreamed of nothing. I slept well. There was no sign of Kilena. The Pones had stayed. They think life is going to be interesting, said Glurk. They used to like working for the Vortgorns. People used to come and read them stories and things. Must be hard having a brain and no hands to do things with it. We'd better go to Ware, said Bane. I don't think we've got any choice. We've got lots of choice, said Pismir. It's just that we've got to choose to go to Ware. Glurk saddled up Accutong. Interesting times ahead, he said gloomily. Bane took a last look around the sugar clearing. She's here, somewhere, he said. Everywhere, said Pismir. Everywhere there's a choice to be made. There was a faraway look in Bane's eyes. What must it be like, he said, to know everything that could happen? Terrible, said Pismir. Now come along, Bane. I said, come on. Snibble had led the search after the storm. They'd sifted through the rubble of the place. They'd gone down into Underlay, roped together, and shouted out the names of those who were lost. They'd found nothing. But as Pismir would have pointed out, finding nothing was better than finding something. Then they discovered the tracks in the distant clearing. Lots of creatures had come up. It seemed to Snibble that there had been someone else following them. Someone who had lain low for a while in the bushes. But everything was covered with dust, shaken down by the storm, and it was hard to be sure. The tracks, such as they were, led south. The Mudrungs had helped Bracando's people rebuild the walls and things, even though the rock itself was now visibly leaning over. And as someone said, if Frey came again, at least now they knew how to get into the Underlay. Nothing would get them there. Snibble thought about this as he rode Roland through the hares, looking for any more tracks. We can always go into the Underlay, he thought. We can stop being people. We can just grub around in the dark. The Deaf Meanies think that no enemy is too big to fight, but we never even seen Frey. The Doomy don't think like that. They think that if an enemy is too big, you should find a smaller enemy. Maybe Pismir is right. We can't stop Frey, but at least we can stop being frightened of Frey. I'm going to wear, he told the tribe that evening. They looked at him in horror. Technically, Glurk was still chief, if he was alive. If he wasn't, then Sneebro was chief. Glurk's children were all too young. No one wanted to lose another chief. You can't leave us, said Deoder Plint, who was the tribe's shoemaker. You're the leader. Where's important, said Sneebro. We'd just be simple hunters if it wasn't for the Empire. The Mudrungs looked at each other. We are simple hunters, said Plint. Yes, but at least we know we are, said Sneebro. Anyway, we've got a little more complicated. That's true, said Cruelly Wolf, who was nearly as old as Pismir. People don't hit one another over the head with clubs as much as they did when I was a boy. There's more arguing. That doesn't mean we're better people, said Plint. Cruelly Wolf rubbed his head. I don't know, he said. People are taller now. They don't groan so much either. Huh. But the Death Meanies don't have anything to do with the Doomy, said Plint. And they manage. They fight them, said Sneebro simply. It's amazing how things rub off, even when you fight people. Ideas like not just killing people all the time, that sort of a thing. A Death Meanie put his hand up. That's true, he said. The king always used to throw people off the rocks in the old days. He still does, said another Death Meanie. Yes, but he doesn't laugh about it so much. And he says he's doing it for their own good. See, said Sneebro desperately. The Doomy have affected, even if you're the enemy. I'm going south. Perhaps I can find the others. Perhaps the Empire can help us. Yes, but you're our leader, Pip began again. Then I'm going to lead, snapped Sneebro. Who else is coming? Some of the younger Mudruns raised their hands. The Death Meanie stood up. Will there be fighting against impossible odds? He asked. Probably, said Sneebro. Right. Count us in. A lot of Death Meanies nodded. Another one asked, and will we get a chance to fight to the death? You might get a chance to fight to the enemy's death, said Sneebro. Is that as good? Better. Right then, we're with you. In the end, 350 Death Meanies and 50 Mudrungs volunteered to go. On the rock, their families would be safe as anywhere in the carpet, they agreed, but someone had to stay. Anything could happen. 400, thought Sneebro. Who knows how many we're going to face? On the other hand, since we don't know how many we're going to face, 400 might be just enough. Always choose a bigger enemy. It makes him easier to hit. We must go to where? It's where we all began, in a way. It's where people first realized that there may be a better way of doing things than hitting one another on the head.